Hello, welcome to the October 4th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in the live chat field or simply email questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions, and we will answer all the questions chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, we will get through it in time. And if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're using. So if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs, also which version number, so if it's 11, 12, 13, and also which operating system, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. So you could look for the topics and navigate directly based upon the timestamp to the video. Also, if you wanted to search for topics, we've covered over 34,000 topics in this series. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating a wonderful site where you can just kind of type in your question and it will search through all the different topics. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just really do this out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community experience, and it's much appreciated. We'll also give a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful site that's really incredibly helpful and relevant for the Steinberg community, to a collection of tutorials and articles and tips and tricks. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products there, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live or watching it on the replay, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to have people from all over the world. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so we see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset, UK. Great to have you on. We have Tim K from Zeist in the Netherlands, and his cat Buddy is waving a paw to my cat Steven, and Mark Raven's dog Stella, and other pets. We have Stefan checking in from Sweden as well. Great to see you back. You have Rich Schweitzer saying hello from West Palm Beach. All right, we see Jazz Dude on. All right, and we see, looks like Wochsi, or I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but it just says, I just bought Cubase 13 Pro, switching from FL Studio. Greetings from Journey. Welcome to the live stream, and we hope to see you on many future live streams, and we'll get you up to speed on your Cubase so that you'll become a power user. All right, and we see Fly V checking in from Winnipeg, Canada. Thanks for joining. We have Benny from Sweden. We have Daniel, says all his Pringles are gone. It says, what are we going to do? So, yeah, that's a tough one. So, maybe you get an Uber Eats to deliver Pringles. That's probably what most Americans would do in a crisis. All right, we have Uno Momento checking in from Finland. He says he just bought Absolute 6, but he hasn't had time to check it out fully yet. Says it takes time, I know. So it's a big package. All right. Daniel from Croatia is sending greetings to the beautiful DC. Okay, so Rich Schweitzer asks, so all of a sudden when I have a track record enabled and I hit the space bar, it goes into record. Is that a preference somewhere, Cubase 13? So it could be that you just have, let's say if I come over here and I have this particular event selected, so you might have just enabled, look on your transport right here, and see if you have punch in, and you could just hit the letter I. So now let's say if I just have this track, I'll do it on audio track. So let's say I have this track. All right, so now when I just kind of hit, like if I have my left locator kind of set around the events, when I hit play, it could, and I have the punch in enabled, so just the I right here, that now that could automatically start the recording. So let's say if I just wanted to come over here to like this particular track, that as soon as we are starting from the spacebar, that it could automatically be set to punch in. So I think that probably if you just hit the I, it sounds like it's maybe just doing a particular punch in on that particular track. So give that a try and see. So let's say again, if I'm just that we could so just make sure that punch in and punch out isn't turned on. I think that will solve the problem for you, Rich. All right, we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. Very loyal attendee. All right, we have Melo Minek sending love from India. Thanks for joining us today. And we have Michael Graybill from Dallas, Texas. All right, we have Hoy Boy sending greetings from LA. Says thanks for the help you provide. Always glad to help. All right, we have Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California, joining us, saying hello to all the Cubase amigos. Okay, Michael Harvey has a question. I'm using Cubase 13 Pro with the most recent update, and on Windows 10 Pro, sometimes Cubase will open a song and then the song will not play from where the play cursor is. Fix beyond rebooting. Okay, so sometimes it could, there are different start modes in 13 to be aware of. So let's say if I want to come over here, we'll see when we go to start mode. So I could just have it play from the selection start. So say I think that I'm playing from here, but I have this event selected. So now when I hit play, it's going to play from the selection start. So if I have an event that's here and it's selected, I think when I hit play, it's going to continue on. It's going to play from the selection start. Now, also, additional start modes can be where the cycle starts. So we have, let's say, our loop here. So when I come over here and we hit play, that we could have it based on, I'll activate this, so when I have this cycle turned on, that when I hit play, it automatically goes to where our start and end of our loop is based. And then if we wanted to choose from selection or cycle start, what we could do now is if I have an event selected, it will play from the event. If I have no event selected, it will play from the range. So I think it's probably going to be like your start mode. If you want it to behave like previous versions of Cubase, we could just say we're going to start from the cursor position. So now if I just come over here, we could just see wherever the cursor is, it will start to play based right from there. So again, check the transport menu to start modes, and you could try and just check one of those things, and you could set the behavior for the start mode of where the transport starts. All right, wonderful to see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Glad you can make it today. All right, so Michael Tedstone asks, says, I'm using Cubase Pro 13. When I use a sampler track, sometimes I can't always move the root note when splicing a loop. It seems to become easier if the number of splices exceeds the notes available. All right, so I think that when we do a slice, so let's come over here to the sampler track. I'll just create a sampler track here. I'm going to take a drum loop, drop it in. So I think that when we do the slice, so here, if we're doing with slices, it's generally not going to be so relevant, the actual pitches that the slice is triggered from the MIDI keyboard. So if we do our slices now, so we'll come over here, slice the audio. So now when we look at it, we start our root note at C3 and all the other notes. So I think if we adjust, because those have been mapped accordingly. So let's say if we go back before we slice, all right, let me just add in our sampler track here. So if we go to our sampler track and we have a fresh sampler track, I drag this in and then I set the slice note to be at C1 instead. So now when I go to slice the audio, we can see that now it's going to be based at C1. So I would set kind of the root note before doing slices. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, and we have Martin checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Ecstasy Tunes asks, hi Greg, how can I make the encoder on my MIDI controller used as a jog wheel? I'm not able to set it up using MIDI remote. Kindly advise, please. All right, so a lot of times when we have an encoder on a particular knob, so say we have an encoder on our MIDI control here. So then what we could do, all right, so I want to come over here. Let's just make a new MIDI mapping page. Okay, so a lot of times certain MIDI controllers, when we want to do like a jog, it seems like we are moving the value, when we go to we'll go to transport, and let's see, it's probably going to be under key commands, and we'll just say jog. So we're going to have one button that says jog left and jog right. So let's say I come over here and I want this to be jog left and another button here that's jog right. So I move this and we apply the mapping. So now when we have our transport here, that I could use this. Now when we do this, it's only going to be utilizing kind of one controller that's two separate functions, and we're going to have a MIDI message for different functions. Now most controllers will put the same value, we'll have one value per control. So like on my MIDI controller here, before we do anything. This would spit out like a CC message. This would spit out a different MIDI CC message. Some controllers that have like proper jog wheels, when they're used as a controller, will transmit one MIDI CC message when it's going to the right, like when you move it to the right, and a different CC message when you kind of move the wheel, the encoder, to the left. But that's not very common. So then often that could be a little more expensive. So you may have to just come over and choose just to have one control that jogs left and another control that jogs right if your MIDI controller doesn't have the ability to transmit different MIDI CC messages depending upon the direction. Sometimes you may be able to push an encoder down, and when you push an encoder down, it may put a different value, and that's how some controllers will do it. So it's one value when the controller is in normal position, and when you push the encoder down, it transmits a different MIDI CC message. But for the most, I would say the vast majority, you would need to have one knob here to go in one direction and the other knob to go in the opposite direction. So it's just the nature of what the MIDI controller is transmitting to Cubase. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Cambux from Germany. Welcome to the live stream. All right, we have Sahil Deepak, Midnight Musician, saying hi from India. Thanks for being on tonight. All right, we have Razel Zamini checking in from Denmark. Diego Munoz from Chile. Thanks for being on. All right, we have Michael Sprunt from Ontario, Canada, who says to keep rocking. All right, so we have Val from Vienna, Germany, Y42. All right, so we see Zephaniah. Hey, Greg, how do I get the cursor to jump to the place where I'm starting my record without scrolling with the mouse using Cubase 13 Pro on PC? Okay, so how do I get the cursor to jump to the place where I'm starting my record without scrolling with the mouse? Okay, so if we are, and again, I'm not sure how, so let's say if I am recording on a we discussed kind of the transport start modes. And under transport, there's also a video follows edit mode. So when I click an event, the cursor immediately goes to the beginning of that particular event. So this way the cursor immediately moves to the beginning. So I select this, the cursor is right there. So that could be one way of approaching it. But I'm not sure now if you are recording, and let's say I am here, right, and I'm going to record. So let's say I'm recording audio, my cursor is off screen, so I'm going to turn this off and say, now when I'm recording but I don't see it, so you may have to turn on, so it's kind of off screen. If that's the case, you could just hit the F key to turn follow on, and then that will update the display to where the cursor is. So let me know if those are helpful for you, but I don't know exactly where you're starting to record, but those are a couple of things. So if you have an event that you're already recording and I have that selected, again, we could go to transport to start mode, and I can say let's go from selection start, and then when I hit record I could just go directly to the selected event. So as we just want to punch in right from there. So let me know if any of those are helpful for you, Zephaniah. All right, and we have Peter checking in from Montreal, wishing everyone a happy Friday. All right, and we also have JLR from Montreal. All right, so we see, hi from Montreal. I'm on Cubase 13 Mac Ventura. How can I add negative delay on multiple instrument tracks at once? I tried selecting all, but only changed the delay on one track. So if we wanted to move multiple events, so let's say, if we had events, if you wanted to do like the track delay, I think this is going to be one track at a time, but let me just I'll try something here. All right, so let's say I have these tracks selected. We have 0 milliseconds of delay. I'm going to try, see if Q-Link works. I don't think it will. Yeah, so when we do this, if we're doing it from this is only going to do one track at a time for the delay. But if we had events, and I know this may not be ideal for lots of cases, like especially if you're doing MIDI editing where you want it applied to the grid, but if we come here and adjust the start time of multiply selected events, we could kind of achieve a delay, but that does move the event, which may not be ideal. But I think that when we do just a track delay here, that's going to be one track at a time, which I understand could be annoying. Okay, we have just Hoy Boy asks or says, I created a large orchestral template using multi-output racks and VEP on a slave PC. I would like to start with a small session and import tracks and import and MIDI tracks from that large session as needed. Yeah, so some people I know do that, and what they'll do is just come over and they will export selected tracks like as needed. So we'll say, okay, let's export selected tracks. You can give it a name. Let's put it on the desktop. Okay, and now if we're in a new project, you could choose, and I think this is how Alan Silvestri, famous film composer, does his stuff, and then you import a track archive, and now we could just select all and hit OK, and then you could add in your instruments with all of their routings preserved for you. Now, what many people will also do now, kind of a more contemporary workflow, and if this, this may make sense or may not make sense for your workflow, but let's say if we're here, many people will choose just to disable and enable tracks as needed. And this way you don't have to import tracks, but you could just kind of right-click and disable tracks, and then those tracks aren't taking any CPU power. They're all completely disabled, and now we could just choose to enable those particular tracks as needed for your workflow. All right, so we see Terrence Shaw just says, hi Greg, I'm getting feedback during UR12 loopback. Is this a routing error? So usually it's pretty, so make sure that you're only going, it could be that when you're doing loopback, make sure that you don't have any tracks that are record enabled that are utilizing that input. So if you're not familiar with loopback, you could come over to your audio interface. I have a URC, which would be similar to UR12, and then we could just come over here, and other interfaces will have kind of similar functionality where we could enable kind of the loopback function as you need to, so that we could have a mixer that's going to be for the DAW use and a mixer that's going to be used for the for streaming. So, but make sure that you don't have any tracks that are potentially record enabled while you're looping back. I can see how that could create kind of a feedback loop, because usually you don't want to be in a recording situation when loopback is on, that you'd want to have the input set for the microphone so that you could talk over the loopback while transmitting the audio. So just check that, Terrence, and let me know. All right, we have John HALion just says, hello, everyone. Great day for Cubase in Nixa, Missouri. So thanks for joining us. Great to see you back. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer sending greetings from the Wilmington MRI department. Well, we hope you're doing well. Best of luck with your appointment. We hope everything turns out fine. You'll be in our thoughts. All right, Artist Known as Love wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, Georgios asks, hi Greg, why can't I try different algorithms in VariAudio? Well, I can't change it, but then I move something, it goes back to the standard solo. So part of the algorithm that's being used is also the algorithm it's tied into the pitch detection as well. So so that's why it will switch to your particular, it will switch to that algorithm, because that's the algorithm that's used, and it's kind of inherently tied to the pitch detection, whereas the other ones aren't designed for that. So that's why you have the standard solo as the algorithm, because not only is it for playing and processing it back, but it's actually part of the detection process. All right, so we have Varani checking in from Kenya. Jazz Dude just emphasized Vienna in Austria. So yeah, we have a Vienna in Virginia, not too far from me. But I think it may have been named after the Austrian city. All right, we see Tiago who's based in Newcastle in the UK now, saying hello to all the Cubase folks. Okay, so we see Varani Media Kenya asks, how, or rather when, will Cubase be able to start and stop fast enough to perform live with? So yeah, we have lots of people that are doing live stuff with Cubase. You can check out the Hans Zimmer tours, a lot of Cubase stuff going on there. But let me know what you don't find fast enough. So it could be, if you have kind of latency in your system, it could be more indicative of the buffer size of your audio interface. But let's say if I'm here, and I'm but we have lots of people use Cubase for live backing tracks with no issue. But let me know if you don't find to start the transport You know, if we have like a really high buffer size for your audio interface, so let's say if I do this and we change the buffer to 2048, then it's going to be delayed. Or if we have, you know, like real-time plugins that are being compensated for, that could add to the transport delays. But, you know, generally it's not an issue. We've seen many tours that have Cubase and Nuendo doing all the playback tracks. It's pretty common. If I'm misunderstanding, let me know. All right, so we see Bratman Studio just says, hey Greg, Rick in Southern California. It's going to be a hot weekend here. It says about Absolute 6, I was exploring some loops and some had to circle with red line over them. Shouldn't I have access to all loops? So, you know, I think that there are some that come with Absolute 6, but it depends. You can install content utilizing the Steinberg download assistant. So I'll just get this opened up here. So there's lots of people that go to the Steinberg download assistant where everything is available, and you kind of basically just want to go to, you know, once you enter in your download access code, you'll see the My Steinberg, you'll see My Product Downloads. So you can see that Absolute 6 is going to contain all of these instruments and content, and I think there's some loop content. So I think that so like Rock Essentials, some of these. So when we want to go over to our loops and we'll say, okay, let's look for Rock Essentials. Let's see if I have it installed here. But if you see just to the left of the name, you know, what you could do is if you see like a red circle with kind of a horizontal slash, that just means that you don't have the license for it. So it's easy sometimes for people to, one guy I've been helping out, he just downloaded like every instrument, every groove agent instrument, and then, you know, wanted to have access to all of these instruments because he downloaded them, but he didn't actually purchase the license for it. So when you put in your download access code, just make sure that it is in your My Products section, and then everything that is in your My Products section you should have. So if you could let me know, sometimes you may, when you go to a particular library, you may come over here and say, okay, all these are grayed out. Is this, you know, is this library called Soul Assembly? Is that with Cubase license? Is that in Absolute? So if you could maybe detail it to a particular library, Rick, then we'd probably be able to see if that's part of Absolute 6, but there are lots of other content that's available that's not in Absolute 6 as well. Great to see JVI on. Says, thanks for these streams. I always learn something. All right. Sahil Solanki asks, may you explain about track versions in the channel inspector? What's the use of it? Okay. So what track versions are going to allow us to do is, let's say if I did, we'll just do new project here. Okay, so let's say I have a piano and I'm just doing a quick recording. So when we come over, let's say, just for those that don't know what track versions are, and we can do this for audio tracks, MIDI tracks, instrument, tempo tracks, chord tracks, etc. So now I could come over here and let's say I record. All right, and now it's like, oh, maybe that's a good take. Maybe I want to try something else, but I want to keep that there just in case. So we could do a new version, and then all right, and let's say, okay, I like that idea, but let me try something else. So now, while we play this back, we could switch between our different track versions. Like take one. So, and if I don't put it into record. All right, and just like the first question, how we had Cubase automatically punch into record. So now, then I could go to version 2. And version 1. So we could, I don't have to change any routings. I don't have to add new tracks. So when we go to our inspector area here, this just allows us to kind of switch between our different. So if we just have a track selected and we have very small track heights, I don't have to kind of hunt for it there. I could just simply come right over here and switch between my track versions. And then if I wanted to add a new track version to record, so say I come here, I could do it from the inspector. And if I wanted to duplicate track versions or get rid of them, so instead of having to access this pull down menu, we could just access this functionality directly inside of the inspector. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay. Okay, so we see from Lucas Korkuk. Hi, I bought some years ago Cubase Artist 10, and now I tried to install on new computer. The download assistant showed me my product installed LE Elements AI 13Y. Is this upgrade for free? So I think that when you get like Cubase LE and AI come with, LE comes with like third-party hardware bundled, and AI comes with like Yamaha and Steinberg hardware, that you'll get the latest version. But make sure, you know, all you would have to do is in the Steinberg download assistant. Let me just open that up again. All right, so, but you know, you don't have to necessarily. So with your Cubase Artist 10, I think that you should be able to just come to the Cubase here. So with the Cubase Artist 10, the license is going to be on a USB-E licenser. But I think that you might be able. So as you come over here, so you could just go to, you know, so if you don't see it under my product downloads, it could be that this isn't associated with your USB-E licenser, but you could just download the Cubase Artist 10 directly from here, and then you're able to utilize your USB-E licenser, and realize that next year the USB-E licenser server will be sunsetted. It will be turned off. So if you wanted to jump up to upgrades that so that you could still upgrade at a discount, I would, if that's something that's appealing to you, I would do that before next year when the e-licenser server will be shut down, so you don't have to buy a later version of Cubase from scratch. All right, and also kind of follow-up question, which one is better to use, Artist 10 or Elements 13? So Artist 10 is it's a higher level, but obviously 3 versions behind. I would, if you had the possibility, I would jump up to Artist 13 and check that out and see if you have the option of utilizing that. But there will be some, while it's 3 generations behind, there's going to be more plugins, more capabilities that isn't in Artist 10 that's not found in Elements. So you see from Terrence Shaw says, thanks, Greg. So during loopback in the Zoom, if I wanted to record DI guitar, I would need another mixer app. So I'm not sure if it's a mixer app or you're just kind of trying to send the audio from the guitar to multiple destinations. So you're already kind of, when we do a loopback, the audio input, and I could test this after the live stream just to make sure, but the audio input is often used, like, so if you're doing gaming, so that a microphone could be used to kind of go on the stream so that you could communicate using the audio device and play back the audio. But I don't think the intention of the loopback is to take the incoming audio input, send it to Cubase, and send it to, at the same time, to like the Zoom meetup, to like the Zoom meeting. So I think the loopback is really intended just to send the input to the Zoom so that you could use the audio interface, and it's really used in a lot of cases for gamers so that their game audio can come through, and they could also shout at people and tell them they're going to shoot them and stuff like that in the game. So, but as opposed to sending that signal to both the stream and in Cubase. But I could test it. If you want to send me an email over the weekend, I'd be happy to do a test on that just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. All right, so we see Majid Mohammed. Hello, is there a way to swap old plugins with new ones while keeping the same data? Example, adding Contact 8 instead of Contact 7 in an instrumental track while keeping the same sounds and contents. So a lot of plugins do that automatically. So like if I had a project that was done in HALion 4 or HALion 5, HALion 6, HALion 7, would automatically take all the settings from those earlier versions and apply it to HALion 7. So it's really up to how the actual VST is designed to handle that. I know sometimes with some VSTs you may have to keep multiple versions, because if it was done in an earlier version, it may not automatically open up into later versions. It can be done if the company who's designed the plugin and created the plugin has thought of that functionality in the plugin design. So I'm not sure. I don't have Contact 8 to test with. But it's really up to the plugin developer how it migrates the data from earlier versions of the same plugin to later's. Okay, so we have DJ Showcase checking in from New York, and he asks, what is the best settings for Vox time stretching for remixing a Vox to beat with different BPM and settings? There are a few options for time stretching. All right, so probably the one that I would use, so let's say if I was just kind of making a parameter here, so we'll go to, let's say I'll just build a quick track here. Okay, so I have this in time stretch mode. Okay, and let's just find a quick. Okay, so say now we have this. Okay, so we want to make sure that all of the audio tracks are in musical mode, so that when we drop them in, they're going to kind of automatically follow the tempo of our recording. So now let's say, so as we do this, we can see that we could have, so when we want to do vocals,
ooh, yeah, yeah, I'm the one that needed closure.
All right, so now when we drop this in, we could place it into musical mode. So let's say our original tempo on this is 95 beats per minute. So we listen to.
I'm the one that needed closure.
All right, so when we come over here, I would probably choose the elastic algorithms. So we can see this, and we can think of, probably the standard algorithms are going to be good. So I would say the time is going to be more for rhythmic elements. So, and pitch, I would probably utilize pitch for vocals. And then if you wanted to kind of mimic and do very speed recording like a tape machine, we could choose Elastic Pro Tape. So now when I come over here and I slow down the tempo, let's say from 95 beats a minute to say 75 beats a minute, and I hit play.
I'm the one that needed closure.
And if I want to slow down even further,
I'm the one who needed change.
so we can see, and usually a lot of algorithms show their, it's harder for it to slow down and kind of fill in space in real time versus doing it in as opposed to speeding it up. So you can see that even down down to 2/3 of the speed still sounds really good. And you could also choose if you want it to be formant pitch. So if you want to switch the algorithm to that.
Couldn't leave this all unanswered. Couldn't deal with all this pain.
So now let's play back at the original tempo. So let's say we jump back to 95. So we go up.
I'm the one that needed closure.
And let's say, okay, let's go to 120.
I'm the one who needed change. Couldn't leave this all unanswered.
So I would generally kind of utilize the elastic pitch for vocals. If you are doing a lot of pitch shifting where the pitch is changing, going down, and you notice that the character is changing, I would then utilize formant pitch. So, but if you're keeping it the same pitch, I think that this algorithm would be the one I would use for vocals. All right, so we see Thomas just says, why is my question about HALion disappearing? Am I doing something wrong? So I haven't seen it, so maybe it's just, sometimes I think there's a 200 character limit. All right, so we see Thomas' question, is it possible to modulate an audio effect in HALion? For example, modulate the amount of tube distortion with an envelope. All right, so I was playing around with this in the last couple days. So I didn't find a way to do like the effects internally in HALion. So, but let's say if I start off here with like a sample instrument, and let's say if we drag a file over, so here when we go into edit to zone, sorry, I was having a brain cramp on this the other day, and let's say if we go to our LFO page, we could do, if we wanted to see like our, if we wanted to come over here and see like our filters, we could just come over here, and if we wanted to now modulate the filters, but let's say, okay, let's get to our LFO. So now if we have our LFO and we wanted this, and we wanted to look for destination, I didn't find a way to, if we have the effect in the mixer, so let's say we go to the slots for this particular channel and we have a distortion, let's say amplifier, and I wanted the LFO to do this, that wasn't an LFO destination, but let's come over, so let's say we go to edit to our zone. So when I come over to our destinations, I don't see the internal effects anywhere here as a modulation destination, but if we wanted to come over and use like the MIDI inserts, we could use, so I'm not sure if it has to be kind of internally within HALion, but if we come over and utilize the auto LFO, I'm going to set this to transmit on MIDI CC 12. And now that this is kind of going, what I want to do is let's go back to the mixer. And now what I want to do is we'll take this control here, let's say the level, and I'll say learn CC. And then we could move this CC value. So now as we would hit play,
I'm the one that needed closure. I'm the one who needed change.
we could say, okay, I want this to be,
Couldn't leave this all unanswered.
like whole notes.
Couldn't do it
And
all
we could
this
say, I
way.
want my modulation source here, and I could have different envelopes. So that way we could modulate a parameter from the Auto LFO plugin, but I couldn't find it as a destination. Like when I come over here to edit to zone and we go to the modulation matrix, or we can say, okay, LFO 1. Here I couldn't find the effects, like the internal effects inside of HALion as a modulation destination, but if I use the Auto LFO, that would work. So let me know if that is helpful for you. Okay, Big Rat Studios asks, please, how do I detect the tempo of an imported audio file in Cubase? All right, so we'll do new project. Let's import an audio file. Okay, so it's like as we're playing this, and I have my click track now, and this file isn't matching up with that at all. What I could do loop, sorry. Select the event and come right over here to your project menu and just do a tempo detection. And now it's created the tempo map. So now, as soon as we've done that, we could just say, okay, we're going to find like the downbeat of the audio. So let's say, all right. So say our downbeat is right here. We have like 2 beats of an intro. We're going to say this is 4/4. And now we've determined the tempo of the audio. So, and then it's created the tempo map of that performance for you. All right, so we see Keith Gilmore asks, hi from France. Since the update to Windows 11, Cubase 13 Pro, i9, bags of RAM, SSDs, etc., control room will not save any VST inserts, including supervision, etc. So I haven't had, I'm running Windows 10 on my personal system, but when I go to the control room, all my inserts are preserved. So let's say if I come over here and I have my supervision as an insert. So let's say, you know, I have that. Now, if I go to another project, you know, because usually the control room settings are automatically preserved unless, like, you know, they're kind of project independent. So if I go to a new project here and I go to my control room, these settings persist for me, and it's always how it's kind of worked for me, because these aren't actually saved within the project. These are kind of, you know, as you turn Cubase on and open up a project, these will automatically be accessed. Let me know if, you know, maybe it's a plugin that is, you know, a victim of constrained delay compensation being disabled because it has high latency. So let me know if you have the constrained delay compensation, if you see the plugin, or it's just not there whenever you start a new project. But generally, every time I've run it, whatever plugins I put in here will persist when opening up other projects, because these control room settings are kind of universal and not saved with a particular project. Also, let me know if you're starting off from a template or not, or if you're starting from like an empty project file. That information could be helpful. All right, so while we're here, I just see how to change the key of an audio file in Cubase. So we could transpose tracks, and we won't necessarily take it from like a, you know, G major to G minor. But if we wanted to transpose, so let's say if I come here, activate the project, that would help. So if I just select the event, I could just come right over here and we'll see transpose. So you could just use your mouse scroll wheel to make adjustments here. So let me know if that makes sense, that we could transpose up and down via semitones and transpose, and under fine tune, we could have this in cents. So you have 100 cents within a semitone. All right, we have a question. Hi, how to render MIDI inserts in Cubase 13? Okay, so let's come over here. Do new project. So let's say I want to open up. I think we have one set up here. All right, so generally the MIDI inserts will actually just process based on, so let's come over here, let's say I have a bass part, and I have my arpeggi. So I just have, I'm just gonna play, I'm gonna hold down a C major chord, and now when I turn on the arpeggi, it's gonna arpeggiate it. So, but when I actually record notes, and I'll just take this off of monophonic mode. Just bear with me a second. Okay, so I'm just going to play a chord. So let me just solo that track. All right. So now when I place this into record, I'm going to play chord. So when I record it, even though we hear the arpeggiators, when we look at the events, it's just going to see a block chord. Then the arpeggiator is handled in real time. Now we could record the arpeggiators by, we see this little line. I move this down. So now as I record, I will just start from here. And now that has actually recorded the arpeggiation in real time. So once we select the track here, we can move that down and record it. But if we have kind of just our block chords here that are being processed through the arpeggiator, what we could do now is go to your MIDI menu, and we'll see Freeze MIDI modifiers. And this is basically taking the real-time effects and real-time MIDI processing and rendering it. So we could just come right over here, Freeze MIDI modifiers, and I'll just do it for the track. And I'll turn it on, that'll help. Now put it in record mode. Yep. All right, so say I record with this on. Sorry. All right, so we see block chords, MIDI to freeze MIDI modifiers, and then the MIDI inserts will automatically be rendered out. So just MIDI menu to freeze MIDI modifiers. Okay. All right, so sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we have Kiri Tone 3. Can you please go into more detail what I need to do when the eLicenser server is shut down? So when the eLicenser server is shut down, all of your licenses that you have activated will function as you know, will continue to run on the USB-E licenser. So if you have plugins that are on the USB-E licenser, those will still work. But you won't be able to activate a new license from the e-licenser server. So if for some reason you went out and bought Cubase 10 and you had an activation code for Cubase 10, and you didn't want to have it automatically turned into the latest version, that when you activate it, those activations for new e-licenser licenses won't be processed. Also, what's going to happen is if you wanted to upgrade, let's say before the e-licenser shuts down, and you wanted to upgrade, let's say Cubase 11 to Cubase 13, currently you could do that at a discounted update, and it's going to transform your Cubase 11 license on the e-licenser to the Steinberg licensing system with Cubase 12, or Cubase that was introduced with Cubase 12 and is used in Cubase 13. So if you wanted to upgrade or update from an earlier version that's using the e-licenser key to a Steinberg licensing, you would need to do that process before the e-licenser shuts down. Now, many of the products like Groove Agent and HALion Symphonic Orchestra have migrated so that you could transition your e-licenser service, the e-licenser license, to a Steinberg licensing. So, and you could see those in your vouchers account, found when you go to your My Steinberg account. So when the e-licenser server is shut down, if you have older versions and you want to update to more contemporary versions, you want to do that transaction before the license server shuts down, so that you don't have to, you're like, oh, I just waited too long and now I have to buy, Cubase 13. Like next year, if you didn't update and you wanted to get Cubase 13, you may have to buy a new version as opposed to updating now. So you won't be able to update e-licenser licenses to Steinberg licensing in later versions at a discount, or you won't be able to authorize a new license on a USB or soft e-licenser. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see Chain or Arcane. Are we ever going to get folder tracks that act like groups? You've probably been asked this a million times, I imagine. So I think that you kind of could get the same functionality already. So let's say we want, because one of the things you have to realize that our folder tracks can contain more tracks that don't actually output audio. So that's something to kind of be aware of. So let's say in this case I have all of my drum tracks, and there is a macro to kind of do this if you want it to work this way. So let's say I have all my drum tracks here, they're selected. So if let's say we have new folder. All right, so all my drums, I want to put these into a folder and a group simultaneously. So if we come over, and my macro list is very large because I make lots of macros, but you may have a few tracks, and one of the macros that comes with Cubase is selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So I do this and we'll say, okay, here's my drums group. So within the folder, and again, my folder can contain a tempo track. It could contain an arranger track. So not everything is tied directly to audio. All right, and we see that now my folder contains all of my tracks and my group. And when I go into my mixer, I could just if I only want to see my drums, all I'd have to do is just come here and hold down Shift, and then I'm only seeing my drum tracks as opposed to everything. So you just click right here, is that Shift, then I'm only seeing my drums with the groups. So but again, our folders are can contain a lot of tracks that don't actually have audio. It could be a MIDI track routed to an external synthesizer or tone module. It could be an instrument track. It could be a transposed track. So, but I think you get very similar functionality just by utilizing that macro. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. All right, so rolling stuff. It's going to have to catch today's live stream on catch up because he's off to rehearse the sound for a local stage production opening next week in Sussex. But he hit the like button, so that's good. Yeah, I have my orchestral concert, a rehearsal, dress rehearsal tomorrow, and a concert on Sunday. So understand. All right, so we have a question from Dorama channel. Hello, Greg. Greetings from Berlin. I want to ask if there's a way to duplicate several tracks on Cubase Pro by selecting just one and putting the number of tracks I want to have, like on Pro Tools. Okay, so I'm not sure how it works in Pro Tools. I've never run it. But if you want to, so you want to duplicate several tracks by selecting just one and putting the number of tracks I want to have. So I'm not sure if you're duplicating the same track or if you're coming here and say, okay, I want to duplicate these tracks. So we could just say, okay, let's duplicate tracks. So we could do it like that. And again, if you needed to do it twice, but I'm not sure if you need to duplicate like this track 3 times or 4 times, and if you need the same content on it. I know that we could also, another macro that's included, and again, you could assign keyboard shortcuts for these. I think there's a duplicate tracks without events, duplicated selected tracks without data, and then so you could do that multiple times, but it doesn't prompt you to do 4 times or 5 times. So I'm not sure if you want to. You say here you want to duplicate several tracks on Cubase by selecting just one. So I'm not sure if you're selecting one track or selecting multiple tracks or several tracks. Maybe if you could clarify that, that would be helpful. All right, so we see from Big Rat Studios, it says, thanks, but I can't find the toolbar where you did the transposing of the audio. All right, so if I want to take just, so let's say, you'll see it right here, and you may have to select an event for the info line to show up. If no event is selected, nothing shows up, but once an event is selected, you should see the info line. If you go to if you still don't see it when an event is selected, if you go to the upper right hand corner, here we could just make sure that the info line is checked. But if no event is selected, then you may not notice it. But if we're here, I have the event selected now, I could transpose just like that. So make sure that you have an event selected. If you have an event selected and still don't see it, go to the setup window up top and make sure that the info line is selected and checked there. Gareth is calling me Greg Wakeman. So. I had to get to meet Rick backstage a couple times. And Greg Carlos. Yeah, met Wendy Carlos a number of times as well. AES shows in New York. All right, so we see Michael Graybill just says a feature request, love CC lane, compress, expand feature when pulling a group of CC data points up or down into the top center white dot, hoping for this along with horizontal 2, so time, squish, / stretch. Okay, so let's say if we have, all right, so just add a MIDI track here. And let's say I got some notes and we have some MIDI CC data. All right, so generally we could come here and I could take my CC data and compress or expand kind of vertically, but I guess we want to do it horizontally. So let's see if we could just do this in. So I don't think that there's like a time stretch function, but we may be able to do something in the logical editor. So let's do our setup here. All right, so we want to transform. We want to come over here, so we'll say type is going to be equal to controller, and we could specify a specific controller if needed, or we could do all controllers. And let's set, see if we could do position. We want to divide by, let's say, 0.9. Let's see if it, I'm not sure why it's jumping like that, but let me just. All right, so I'm going to say divide by 1.1. See if that. And I might have to add one more. Let me just look up one. See if we could. Okay, so let's try. All right, so if we do this. try this, see if this works. Yeah, I could play around with it more and see if I can get that going, but I think that would maybe adjust. Let me see if I specify the actual controller. But I could play around with that over the weekend and see if I could figure out a way of doing it. And I know that if we take the events, so let's say if I come over here, and if we choose to, let's see what happens if we try it with it closed, see if it makes any difference. Yeah, I'll play around with it some more over the weekend to see if I could come up with a logical editor preset for that. Sorry about that. But I'll pass it along as a feature request. Okay, so we see Keith Gilmore says, "Hi Greg, apologies, it just had to play and it seemed to have righted itself. Must be your dulcet tones. I've been trying for months to sort it. Just checked it twice. All okay. So it's good to hear. Yes, it's my karmic voice. I'm like the mechanic who you take the cartoon and it starts working. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. All right, so we see Kiritone3 says, "Thanks, Greg. So I basically upgraded from Cubase Pro 12 from my E-licenser to Cubase 13 Pro. If I need to upgrade to 13.5, for example, I need to do that before 25. Once upgraded, I can unplug the E-licenser." Yeah, so Cubase 12 Pro was already on the Steinberg licensing. So once you're in the Steinberg licensing, it's just to make sure that if you are at Cubase 11 and you haven't upgraded to a version that uses Steinberg licensing, that, you know, to do that before if you wanted to maintain the upgrade and update discount. But if you're already on Cubase 12 Pro, you have nothing to worry about. You can unplug your key. You could unplug your E-licenser. So last Cubase version that used it was Cubase 11. All right, wonderful to see X Cubase X. Looks like he was like number 72. Great to see you on. All right, so we see Uno, Memento, and Pertti Komenen just showing off speaking Finnish. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Ed Visner. Is there a plugin that allows us to use a Premiere Pro sequence in Cubase, or can we play VST sample libraries in Premiere Pro? Anyone know? So I'm not sure if Premiere is doing any VST, you know, if it does any MIDI work at all. So if it's so it may not do any MIDI. It may have sometimes video editors will have the ability of running VST plugins for processing dialogue and other audio for compression and stuff like that. But I'm not sure if Premiere Pro does any MIDI that would play back VST sample libraries. But maybe someone else would know. All right. And we have the familiar refrain of, after dongle discussions, of the infamous # Dave the Songle. All right. All right, so we see from Dorama channel, Greg, yes, I want to duplicate 4 tracks 8 times without data, all with one click. Like the first time you create a new track, you have the option to select the number of tracks that you want. So you could, so let's say I have this bass track here, and I'll just put a plug-in on it, and we'll throw an EQ. Okay, so let's say now I just want to, one of the things you could do is make a macro of this. So let's say we want to do it 8 times. So we'll come over here. So we'll say new macro. We'll say all right, so we'll say duplicate selected tracks without. So I'm going to come here. Let's add that command 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll just do 4 times, but I think you'll get the idea. So now when I just run this macro, I could take that, and then I have 4 tracks duplicated with all the settings. So when we come over here, we can see it's going to have the VST bass amp and the same EQ. If I go down to the next track, and let's say if we undo that, let's say if we want to do this for multiple tracks, and just select multiple tracks, and then you can just duplicate. So if you want to do that 4 times, or if you wanted, and even now if we want to do another 4, we can see that now there's 8 tracks that are duplicated without the data. So you could just, again, make a macro and just kind of run, and that macro is running the macro that's included with Cubase multiple times. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to see. But I think that could get you there very quickly, and you could have that programmed from the MIDI remote or keyboard shortcut. So. All right, wonderful to see Parabot 2 back. All right, and we have Rohith Venkatesh. Hi, sorry if this has already been answered, but is there a way to see all events that have had direct offline processing on them? I find it hard to tell which events I've added it to in total. All right, so let me just do a couple of offline processes. I think that there's a way. Let's come over here. All right, so I think that, once Let's see if there's... I'll just do it on a new track here. It's just it's not going to be in musical mode, so let me just... And, you know, anytime that you select an event, you could see, you know, what processes is on if you open up the offline process history. But let me see if there may be another visual way. Let me just try a quick test. I'll just record just a quick test tone. Okay, so let's look at... Sometimes you get like a little indication. All right, so you see this little indication right here on the event that would indicate that there is offline processing. So let's go ahead and delete. So as soon as we do an offline process, I can say, okay, let's come over here. We're going to run a morph filter. We see this little triangle in the upper right-hand corner of the waveform that indicates that it is off, that there's offline processing on that particular event. So again, we look here, and I wanted to pitch shift. You can see that offline processing is on that particular event. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. All right, so you see Michael Graybill says, wow, Project Logical Editor to the rescue again. Cool idea using the shortened process to do CC stretches and squishes temporarily. Didn't expect a solution. Very cool. Thanks. All right, so we see from Parabot 2, Greg, can I use one instance of HALion Sonic to send different instruments to other MIDI tracks? Or should I use different instances for each track? Can you show how to do this? Thanks. Okay, so let's say I want to come over. We're going to open up HALion Sonic. So we could run multiple instruments in one instance of HALion Sonic. Okay, so if we want to come over here, so I started with an instrument track. Okay, so now I want to come over, and as we would play this particular sound, so I have that on channel 2. Now when I come over here, we could say I want to have a different instrument. I want like an amped Electra, and I'm going to select slot 2. So we'll say, okay, go to amped Electra, and now I want kind of like a Wurlitzer. All right, but we may notice that when I play, this track is still going to channel 1. When I play the keyboard, that's going to 2. Let's say we want a different instrument on channel 3. So I want to add the electric bass. So we'll say we want kind of, and if you mess up like I just did, we can undo. So let's say I want this sound on channel 3. Okay, now, so when I play, I still hear, I have this instrument track that's going to channel 1. Now if I come over and switch the MIDI channel to 2, we have the Wurlitzer, and when I switch to channel 3, I get the bass sound. So if I wanted to kind of simplify this process, what I would do now is select this particular track, the instrument track, and then we want to add MIDI tracks. We already have a channel 1, so I'm going to start at channel 2, and I say let's add track, and I'll do that one more time. So let's say we have our instrument track. So I want to add MIDI tracks, so we'll go add track MIDI. And now I will just say we want to do 3 tracks, and I want it to start at channel 2. So now I have the anima, I come here, I have the amped Electra, and now when I come, and if I wanted to add a different voice on channel 4 here, I could just say, okay, let's come over to, say something from FM7, double click. So now when I'm on this track, and the great thing is, you'll notice that as I do this, HALion Sonic will automatically update for the instrument. Now the only downside of this is some instruments may take more processing power, because a lot of instruments will only utilize one CPU core. So it could be if you load up 16 instruments, that's going to take, it could overwhelm one CPU core, and if you have 12 CPU cores, it's not allocating it across. That's how most instruments work, but HALion Sonic is a bit smarter in that we could actually come over here and we'll see like multi-core processing. I could just utilize multi-cores within the particular instrument right here, so it's not necessarily a gotcha with HALion. So start with an instrument track, then add MIDI tracks started on the channel above where you are, and then you could run multi-timbral instances. And I for organization purposes, I kind of like the ability to just say, okay, I have one instrument, I want to edit this sound, I want to go here, okay, I want to change something here, I want to change something there, that it's automatically updated depending on what is selected. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Don Joni asks, what's the difference from Cubase AI to Cubase LE? They're both like OEM, so you get it with hardware, so they're bundled with hardware. Cubase LE is bundled with third-party hardware, so different audio interfaces will use Cubase LE. Cubase AI is going to be bundled with Steinberg and Yamaha hardware. And why they call it AI is advanced integration. So like when we want to utilize, so let's say if I add, and like a lot of audio interfaces, you have to go into their control panel to make adjustments. But what we could do inside of like an AI version is, let's say if I come to my audio track, and if I have this input routed, let's say to an audio input, what the AI is going to like, it's not artificial intelligence. We've been doing this since like 2008 with the AI moniker. But now you could access all of the settings for your DSP right here. So if you wanted to access the built-in reverb, or if you wanted to run different effects like the morphing channel strip that's powered by the DSP themselves, you can do this and have this level of integration. So this is the advanced integration that you get with AI that's not available in LE. But both of them are kind of what's called OEM, or they're bundled software that with hardware. But the AI is going to come with Yamaha and Steinberg hardware solutions. All right, so we see FlyV ask, hey Greg, how do you get all your chords on the chord track? So one way is just by coming over and saying, let me just, so let's say we got, here, I'll just, so you could enter your chords in. If it's like for an existing, like let's say you import a MIDI data or audio, what's kind of cool about this is we can say, okay, I wanted to come over here to this song. I could add a chord track. So say we'll add track. We'll go to the chord track, and I'll just drag the file down, and it will do an analysis of my MIDI or audio and automatically generate the chords. So that's a lot of times how I do it, like how I do it. So if someone sends me a project and they're like, hey, can you play bass on this for me? I will take the project and just do a quick chord analysis of it. So I have kind of my lead sheet laid out for me. But you could also just kind of come right over here on the chord track, select the pencil tool. You could double click and enter in your chords manually, or if you just have MIDI input enabled here, you could just play a chord and that will place the chord for you. So that will define a chord, and if you hit the plus, that will take you to the next like 4 beats away, a measure away, but you could just simply keep adding in chords manually. But I like the automatic chord detection's great feature. So all right, so we have Yaron Fisher saying hello, Cubase friends. Thanks for being on. And we see Kiritone 3 just says thank you, Greg. 3 exclamation points. And he wants to say hi to different Cubasers. It's sending his greetings from London. All right, and we see Jay from Secret Studios. Thanks for being on today. We hope you're well. All right, so we see question, is it possible to change the instrument of an instrument track that's already created? This would be useful for making templates. So I don't think so, but let's give it a try, see if we could finagle something. Okay, so I'm not sure if you want to switch it to another instrument track. Okay, so let's say we have this set to HALion Sonic. Okay, and so I think that this is going to be kind of intrinsically tied to HALion Sonic. So let's come over here. So let's say we have a couple of notes. All right, so now I'll load up a quick sound. All right, so there's my 21st century composition. So let's come over here to the VST rack. And so let's say I want this to play through Retrologue. So now, yeah, so if you go to the VST rack here, you can just change what was the instrument output. So this is the instrument track that was on HALion Sonic, and then if you just kind of click right here, you could switch it to other instruments. So let's say the grand. That will open up the grand, and now we could choose our model, and as we play back, I'm Philip class now. All right. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so a question from Steve Green. Greg, after importing an audio event, then tempo detect, how do I get the bars to match the tempo detection and the metronome without moving the tempo track around if possible? Okay, so I think the tempo detection should kind of do that for you already. So again, let's come over here. Let's import an audio file. All right, so again, we'll listen to it with... So the metronome isn't really aligned with the audio. But again, selecting it here, get project to tempo detection. So now the bars are lined up. So the tempo events are kind of dictating where the measures are falling. So we're going to start over. And if you have like pickup notes, like this has a little drum. So here we just come right over, and then so it'll figure out where the beats are. So it places it at 1-4, and then I want to go to 4-4 there, I think. So you could just kind of come over there and make those changes. But as you can see, the bars, make sure that you're not set to seconds for your master time, and that you could right click up here and make sure that you have the bars and beats. So, but the metronome, the bars move around after doing the tempo detection. So, but let me know if yours is doing something different, Steve. All right, so we see from Dorama Channel, says, okay, thanks, Greg. I think it works well with the macro, but I'm still thinking it'd be great to have an option to select the number of copies. Do you want to create of the selected tracks? So I'm not sure if it's like, if you're always going to do 8 of the same exact guitar tracks or vocal tracks, or if it's going to be a fixed number. But I think you could always do one and just hold down, if you have the macro assigned to a keyboard shortcut. I don't think it's hateful to, if you want to do 2 or 4 at a time, that you could populate them very quickly. So I think once you work with the macro, you could get it to do exactly what you want, and probably actually faster than duplicating the tracks and setting the number of times manually. Okay. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so we see Big Rat Studios asks, please my MediaBay, those not only selected sound each time I want to audition a sound from the MediaBay, is there any settings I need to do? Okay, so if you're not, like when you're in the MediaBay, if you're not hearing the particular sounds, so let's say if we come over here and we're not hearing these sounds in preview, so a lot of times what you could do is I always have these routed through the control room. So go to your studio and go to audio connections. So how I have mine configured is I have my stereo out set to not connected. And then the control room, I set a monitor. So add a monitor, and I just labeled mine. And so if I add a monitor here, it'll show up as monitor 1, monitor 2, monitor 3, 4. And then I just typed in a label for mine. And now this is where I have it going through. So let's say if I have it set to not connected, I don't hear anything. Let's go to my outputs. And if I have this set to don't hear anything, because these actually don't have a home. These aren't assigned to a particular track. So come over, and I think maybe if we turn the control room off, you might be able to hear it. So if your control room is off, then it could route, but generally I always will route through the control room. So let me know if you have the control room configured for your routing. And then it's always just going straight through my control room. And you can set the level here. All right, so we have Captain Energy Music checking in from Pennsylvania, outside of Harrisburg. He just got here, and he hope everyone doesn't forget to hit the thumbs up like button. All right, so we have Up Close just saying hi, Greg. All right. And we have Jay saying hi to Captain Energy Music. All right, so we see Jack Bourne. I used a library manager and moved all my HALion libraries, but now I'd like to put them back to where they were when originally installed. I just don't know where that was. So it could, really, like when you go to install check, if you want to check, when you come over here to your Steinberg download assistant, I think you could check here, but it may have already been updated. So, but let's open up the Steinberg download assistant. And then when you click on like the little settings cogwheel, I think that you'll see the download directory is just going to be right here. So you could probably see the default path for the downloads and installs there. So try that. And again, in the Steinberg download assistant. All right, so we have a question from Up Close. I just started using Nuendo 13. I think I can assign multiple tracks to outputs 1 and 2 at once, but is there a way to assign, say, 4 stereo tracks to outputs 1 through 2, 3 and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all at once? Okay. All right, so I'll go to my inputs here. Let me just... Okay, so now we have stereo 1, stereo 2, stereo in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's add, say, six stereo tracks. Okay, let me clear my throat. All right, so if I have all of these tracks selected, and if I want them to all go to the same output, I would hold down, so let's go to, it's a routing tab. So I want these all to go to my left. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. And now all of these particular tracks, let me just try again. So it's usually Alt, Option. Let me just check my routing one more time here. These are my inputs. Let me just make outputs now. All right, so I think the key command that you want is just holding down the Shift key. Let me just check one preference here real quick. So I wanted to say it's the Shift key that will allow you to kind of increment, and Alt plus Shift. So let's say if I come here, and it could be, I think I may have one preference that's off. Let me just see if I can find it. Okay, might be the sync selection. All right, so to go to the same, I think it's Alt Shift. And now they're all going to the same destination with Alt or Option plus Shift. We can see that the stereo out here as we go between the tracks. But now if we want to increment, select the tracks, and I think if we just hold down Shift, that we will see stereo out 2, out 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So that will increment. So, but make sure that you have this preference checked. I think it's checked by default of sync selection in project window and mix console. And then just hold down the Shift key and that will increment your routing for you. Sorry about having my preference disabled. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to automatically snap the end of an audio event to the grid in Cubase without doing it manually and keep it aligned if the BPM changes? Okay, so let me just take a quick event over. So let's say if this event All All right, so let's say if we have this event as one measure, and so I'm not sure if you need the end of this event to snap. So as we do that, we could snap. So if you don't want to do it manually, let me just... All right, so let's say if we... So our beginning, let me just turn on snap here. So our beginning could be snapped, but now if we want the end of the event, so I guess we could use the snap point. So I'll just come over here, let's get to our definition. So if we move this snap point here to the end of the event, then we could synchronize that snap point. So once you see this little sync point here, so at that point now we can, as we snap, it's just using the sync point here. So let's say if I just have this particular event, and I'll just quickly create a new file, which is that. Okay, so I can see, we see that this is our file and I want the end of the event. So you may have to turn on, but so you'll see like this little sync point or snap point. I can move that to the end, and now as I move the event, it's going to be based on that snap point, which is at the end. So let me know if that works for you. And sometimes I get this question in regards to, like, if I wanted this event to, like, I wanted to copy this event that doesn't fill out a bar, but I want it to be on the range. So if I duplicate an event here, it's not on the grid because we're duplicating the selected event. But if you needed to duplicate that, I could use the range tool and select and have that snap and then duplicate that so that the start of our events can be on the range as well. So you could just come here, select the range, and duplicate that particular range and keep it on the grid. But let me know if the snap point at the end works and makes sense for you. All right, so we have Drift Music. Says, thanks, Greg, for your always awesome tutelage. Not only is it problem solving and informative, it's amazingly inspirational. Now, if only I had time to put it into practice. Yeah, same here. Sometimes it's tricky. I remember having with my friend Ernst, who is one of the founders of Propeller Heads, we got this discussion of, what happens when your hobby turns into your job. What do you do for a hobby? So, but yeah, thank you for the kind words. So he's an IT systems admin by day and Cubase and window producer by night and weekends when they're free. All right, so we have Drift Music. Says he's watching from Cambridge, Ontario. Thanks for joining us today. See, Parabot 2 says, thank you. That was a huge help, Greg. All right. Glad it worked. All right. Robert Veerbeek asks, is it possible to extract a MIDI drum track into different channels? So separate the notes to different channels. Yeah. So let's show you how to do that. Okay, so let's say we have a track here. So on this particular track, we have different drums. Okay, so, and I want to take each of these to their own separate channel. So what we could do is I could select the event. We go to MIDI to dissolve part, and we can say separate by pitches. Then as soon as we do that, we're going to hit process. And then now each drum source would have its own track. So every single drum sound is on its own separate track. So once again, select the event, go to MIDI to dissolve part, and choose separate pitches. All right, so Sam Sarkar asks, hi Greg, can you help me replace an instrument track with another instrument, including all the effects? Example, I have a Serum synth opened. I want to replace the Serum with Dune. Okay. All right, so let's see if we could. All right, let's just find. All right, so let's say we have this electronic piano part here. And this is going out to HALion Sonic. And let's go ahead and put some effects on it. We'll give it a try. Okay, so let's say as we play it now. Okay, so let's say we're going out to, say, our VSTI rack here. So I just went into the VSTI rack. And all the effects are maintained. So now we're just, so if I wanted to play it back through like a grand piano, now instead with the effects. So select the event, you'll see it selected in the VSTI rack on the right hand side, and change the instrument there. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so wonderful to see Jean-Marie Horvat. He'll be our celebrity audio engineer extraordinaire who's on the live stream today. All right, so we see question from Lucas Korkuk. When is the next live stream with you? So we do these on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at U.S. Eastern time at 1 p.m. So same time as today. So we do these on Tuesdays and Fridays. So Robbie Bowling says, question. So even though I upgraded to 12 from 11, which needed the e-licenser, I could rid myself of it and the e-licenser software. So yeah, you know, you may have some plugins, check all your plugins, but you could definitely run your Cubase without the e-licenser. Once you have kind of gone to, once you transition from the e-licenser to the Steinberg licensing that occurred in 12, then you don't need the license to the e-licenser, USB e-licenser to run 12 anymore. All right, you see Jay from Secret Studios has to run. You'll see us next week. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right. All right, Sam Sarkar just says, how to use a guitar rig or any other amp effects with a MIDI track. Okay, so let's say, just open up one that has some MIDI guitar in it. All right, so let's say I want to take this guitar part here. And let me just pan it in the center here. All right, so now I want to, this is a MIDI track that's being played in a virtual instrument. So I'll just come over here to my VST instrument. And I'm going to send this to its own dedicated output. All right, so we have this clean Strat guitar. I'm going to send this out to its own output. So we go over here to okay. Okay, so this is where our guitar is going out to. Here, let me just. Okay, so I'm going to send this out to output 2. So now as we play, let me just loop this particular part here. All right, let me just find the, okay, so, all right, so we should hear it now. Let me just, all right, so here's my guitar part. Here's in this channel. So this is MIDI guitar, and we're taking the audio output of the instrument. And now I could just come over here, let's run it into Distortion. Let's get to the VST amp rack. And let's say I want it to be maybe a bit Vox. So if we want it to be like a really so then you could run it through all your you want to adjust the microphone position of it. And let's come over here, we could add more effects. So once you kind of have the audio, just run your guitar amp software as an insert effect on that track, and then you should be all set. All right, Keith Gilmore asks, hi Greg, just a question about performance. Is there any performance advantages between HALion / HALion Sonic and SE, and is it better to track 6 instruments in one HALion Sonic or use 6 individual VST? So it could, again, matter if you have the multi-core active inside of HALion Sonic SE, or HALion. So, if you spread it out onto individual instruments, each instrument will automatically run in its own core so that you don't have to, or it will be spread across your different CPU cores. So you don't have to actually do it manually in the program. So. Benny saying Greg's phone is ringing. Steinberg calling. Cubase 14 is finalized. Now, if it's finalized, you'd probably know about it. So I'll try to turn my phone volume down. Just a couple of friends. All right. All right, so we see Jack Bourne just says, thanks always for answering. All right, Parabot2 asks, Greg, what's the fast way to toggle between tracks view into the mixer, but have the entire mixer go full screen with faders, sends, etc., all showing? Thank you. So let's say if I was just doing this project, and I will revert it. All right, and so if we want to kind of take a look at our whole project here, what did you say? And go to the mixer, I just hit F3, and then if you want, you could see inserts and sends. Now these can be set into like an exclusive mode, so if you right click, you can say expand sections exclusively or not. So now I can see my inserts and sends, and just hit F3. So I can go back between the main project and my full screen mixer with EQs, insert, sends. So let me know if that's what you want to do, but yeah, just try hitting the F3 key is the default key for that. All right. So we see from InDrop, hey Greg, I keep trying to disable the info status line, record time, sample rate, etc., but it keeps coming back after a while. Does this happen to you? I'm using the latest version of Cubase Pro 13. All right, so I'll just try now, and if you want to send me, I'll just try to take the status line off, and this may be for this project, but we'll see if I'll do it on my jump off project. And we'll see if that's carried over. All right, so let's say I opened it. I'll use this project several times throughout the live stream today, and I'll see if I disable it, if it shows back up. And if you want to remind me in like 30 minutes, I'll probably jump in and out of this project a lot. So I'll revert. So we're starting with a clean slate. And now I will turn off the status line. We'll see if it pops in. But send me, just drop in an email reminder. I don't remember it kind of turning on and off, but we'll find out. All right, Ali Shaker asks, hi, from Seattle, beautiful city, Mr. Cone there. How do you clear libraries from HALion Sonic user? All right, so from HALion, so if you want to clear the libraries, we could just come over here. So you'll get a utility that's installed with Cubase called the Steinberg Library Manager. So if you wanted to just come over here and remove various libraries for HALion, you could do that. And if it's user presets, let me take a look. So let's go to our MediaBay. And then let's say, okay, I went to user content. So let's say I want to delete this particular preset. I think that we could just right click and delete. So we could do it like that just by going into the MediaBay, and we'll see the full user content right there. And then you could go through your VST3 presets, look for various presets that you've made, and now you could choose to right click and delete. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. Let's see, Uno Memento wants people to whack the like button. All right, make sure I didn't miss any. Okay, says from Mr. Try4666, greetings. What kind of Mac are you using right now? Could you share the specs, please? So it's an M1 Max Pro with 64 gigs of RAM. So let me just open up the right thing. So we'll just say, so it's about almost 2.5 years old now. So it's the MacBook Pro, 14-inch, M1 Max, 64 gigs of RAM. And I get great performance. I have an i9 for my personal computer. All right, Sam Sarkar asks, thank you so much, Greg, for answering my questions. By the way, what was the shortcut you have used to loop the selected part? Yeah, this is a good one. So if you want to loop a selected event, hit Alt or Option plus the letter P, and that will set the locator around it. So if I want to, again, just say, okay, I want to take this event and loop it, select Alt or Option plus the letter P, so that will loop it and play the event, assuming the track's not muted. So if I want to come here,
Ooh, yeah.
so just Alt and Alt/Option letter P, and that will loop the particular event, selected event. It's a good shortcut. All right, so Recyclop just saying howdy from Finland. Thanks for joining us. We have our strong Finland contingent online. All right, so we see Samir asks, hi Greg, why are the CC1 and CC11 not working as before in the main window? Note expression. All right, so let's say if I have my files, I'm not sure if it's in the main window. So let's say if I have, just check the expression. So let's say CC1. So let's say if I have this set to modulation, I could do that. Let's come over here. Let's set CC11. Now sometimes if the height of the tracks is too small, you can, let's say, so right now I can't add a second one, or I can't add my velocity because the vertical height isn't tall enough. But if I come here, I could click and see the velocity. So it could be depending on the vertical height, some of them may disappear. So maybe it's something like that when you say it's on the main window. But it seems to be working for me as expected. Or if you're in the in-place editor, which you could access Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter I. And now we could choose to see, okay, I want to see my modulation. And then we could create a new controller lane and see expression. And again, create a new controller lane. So on the main window, we could edit our CC data and modulation as expected. So let me know if that makes sense or if I misunderstood. All right, so we have Mr. Triforce666. I've been using Cubase professionally for 20 years. I can't believe I'm just now discovering the official YouTube channel. Yeah, there's like thousands of tutorial videos, lots of great stuff on. So, well, welcome to the YouTube channel, and we hope to see you on many more live streams. Again, we do these twice a week, starting U.S. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. All right, the Relax Station channel. Hey there, I have to use the function key when toggling between the mixer and arranger windows. Is there a way to resolve this? Should I just reassign it in the keyboard shortcuts? Well, if your keyboard and sometimes laptops don't have dedicated function keys, then you may have to hit like the function key, and like one key will be shared with multiple uses and the function key turns into a modifier. But if you wanted to change the key command, you could just simply come over here, and if you type in, I think if we go to your devices, and then we go to Mix Console, you can change the key command here to whatever you want the key command to be. So if you don't want, if you had to use the function key and hit another key to access the mixer and you want a different key to do it, you could just simply change it right there. See, says Mr. Triforce666 says this is great. See, Best Green Jesus recommends using binding mouse buttons to get other functions. All right, so we see from Recyclop, in the middle of recording, I turned events into musical mode to change the song tempo. After recording some more, I noticed I lost all earlier warp points. Any way to get them back to, or to avoid it in the future? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say I'm gonna not have this event in musical mode, and I want to do some free warping on it. All right, so I'll just come over first and let's get my hit points. Okay, and then I'm going to create warp markers from that. So now when we go to free warp, all right, so let's go ahead and just move some stuff around really awfully. All right, so now I'm going to place this into musical mode. All right, so say I'm now not in musical mode. Yeah, so once it's in musical mode, it's going to automatically, so we could think of musical mode as kind of like an automated warp because it's taking each of the transients and going back. But I guess what you could do if you wanted to get your warp markers back, an easy way of doing it is just to come over, and if you did it so let's say we come over here and we adjust our hit points in the sample editor, you can now again just create your warp markers and then be able to adjust accordingly. So, but when you do place it in musical mode, it is going to, whatever the tempo is doing, it's basically warping it in real time without having the warp markers. So. All right. All right, so we have Ronnie Martinson Bonde, just saying hello from Sweden. Don't worry about being late, you just have to hit the like button. Okay, so we see Samir says, thanks so very much, Greg. I met with the MIDI fader controllers. Glad to help. All right, Gareth wants everyone to phase correct the like button. Need more samples to choose from. All right, so we see Sam Sarkar just says, Greg, just wanted to express my gratitude to the whole Cubase team. You're doing an amazing job. Moved to Cubase 2 months ago from an DAW, never looked back. Best DAW humankind ever made. Well, thank you for the kind words, and we're happy to have you on the live stream. We hope to see you on many more live streams and Zoom social meetups in the future. Thank you for the kind words. It's very kind. All right, so we had a couple of questions that were mailed in. Let's get to those before we run out of time. All right, so I got kind of a brain cramp on a question yesterday about how to detect silence and make the audio file smaller. All right, so I came up with a macro for this. So let's take a look. Okay, so the premise is that, let's say we have a lot of dead, empty space in our audio recordings, like so. And so in this case, we have audio at the beginning, we have silence, a little bit of audio in the top track here, silence, audio, silence, audio. So we have silence, audio, silence, audio, silence, silence, and then a little bit of audio. So this silence, when it's in an audio file, takes just as much space as when there is an audio file. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to look at this project folder in our Finder. So we're going to say, let's get to our detect silence. We'll look at my audio files. I have 3 audio files now. When I look at this folder, we're going to see that it's going to be 76.217 bytes, so 76 megabytes for all of this audio. Okay, so we want to get rid of the audio that's silent. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually just take this and we're going to use render in place with this. So I'm going to select my tracks, not the events, but the tracks. And we need to set up the render in place from the edit menu. We'll go to our render settings and we want the mode to be set to as separate events. We also want our source tracks. We'll choose this to remove source tracks. Okay, so we're going to have our render set up for this. And at this point, let's go take a look at the macro. And the macro, again, will just run a series of keyboard shortcuts for us, or a series of functions and operations. So now we'll go to our key commands, and I made a macro earlier today. Let me just... All right, and I called it Club Cubase Livestream CCLS, and we said erase silent areas from disk. So what we're going to do is I have all of the tracks selected here. I'm going to select all of the events on the disk. We're going to do a detect silence, and it will go through each of the tracks in order. Then I'm going to select none of the events, and then I'm going to choose to render in place with the current selection. And again, with this, we want no events selected. We want, when we come here, we want the render in place to be as separate events and to remove the source tracks. Then after that, we're going to go to media and remove the unused media. So the tracks that we want to get rid of, we're going to remove them. And then we're going to go to media to erase the events. So now if I run this macro, so again, I need to have my render in place set up with those conditions as separate events and remove source tracks. Select the 3 tracks, and then I'm going to run the macro here. And I think I ran the wrong macro. Let me just select it one more time here. I think that was a previous macro for duplicating the event. Was selected. All right. All right, so this is track 1. I'm going to process the detect silence. It's now rendering the files. It's going to ask me, do you want to erase? Do you want to continue erasing the files? So we'll say yes. And now that we've done that, let's go back to our Finder window. We can see that our audio is now updated, and where we were 76 megabytes, we're now down to 31 megabytes. So it's immediately eradicated all the parts that were silent. And also, since we chose to, one other thing in the render in place settings, if we had effects on them, we would just choose to make sure, one other thing that's could be critical is just to make sure that this is dry, and it's going to automatically take all of the settings from the channel settings will be preserved on the new tracks. So again, this macro is just going to be one, we're going to select all the tracks, have your logical editor set up like this. 3 critical things. So you want to do as you want to render as separate events, you want it to be dry, and we want to remove the source tracks. And then we're going to create the macro with these steps. So we want to say new macro, select the functions, and we want to select all on the tracks. we want to then do the detect silence, and as you saw, it went through each of the tracks separately. We want to go to edit, and we're going to select none. So that basically allows, instead of the events to be selected, the tracks are selected. So then that gives us the correct condition for the render in place scenario, so we can remove the unused tracks. And then from the media, we're going to, so after we remove the unused tracks and then we erase them, we get prompted just to make sure we want them erased, and we choose yes. And all those unnecessary silent parts of the event are automatically gone, not only from your project, but from your hard disk as well. So let me know if that works for, I think that will meet the criteria for last Tuesday's question. All right, let's jump back to our live questions. All right, wonderful to see Lawrence Koch from Rhode Island. Glad you can make it today. All right, so Samir just says, hi, how to assign MIDI fader controllers, note expression CC1 and CC11. So it really depends on, if you have MIDI faders, let me just move my phone out of the way here. All right, so, if you have your faders that are defined as a MIDI control, like as a MIDI remote. So I'm going to come over here, and let's say I have my MIDI remote and I have these faders, okay? And I go, okay, I'm using the MIDI remote. Shouldn't I be able to take these MIDI CC messages and just have them as MIDI CC messages? And this is a question we get a lot. I'll just do it with let me plug in a different controller here. Hang on. Okay, so I have a choice sauce controller I just connected via USB, and we'll see it kind of show up here. All right, now my choice sauce controller, we could come over and we will see that these are transmitting MIDI CC messages. When I add a MIDI track, all right, so we'll say all MIDI inputs, and now at this point, we move this down. I want to go to my MIDI monitor. All right, and I move the fader. I don't see anything happening. Now, once we've defined the MIDI CC as part of the MIDI remote, it's not going to transmit the MIDI CC message to the sequencer. So the MIDI remote is taking that MIDI CC message and taking that language, those words, to control other functions. So if I want to come over here, we'll say, let's open the MIDI remote manager. Okay, or I'm just going to click just right here and we'll say, let's disable the controller script. So now at this point, when I move the fader, I see CC11, CC1. But if we enable that script, then so when we enable the script takes those MIDI messages and uses that to control functions in a program. So if I again want to come over and say, okay, let's come over to our script, and we'll say, let's go to our choice sauce controller. So these are now all transmitting MIDI CC messages. So whether it's your controller, then you could just say, so I have my different faders. So faders 1 and 2. Fader 1 is CC11, CC1. So when we go to our scripts, we'll say, okay, we're going to find our choice sauce controller. And then when we enable it, now we can see my MIDI remote pops up and it's not transmitting to my MIDI CC messages. So again, I could just right click if I wanted to use. Now I could take 4 channels to be MIDI CC messages and 4 channels to do MIDI remote functions if I want. So you can see that my last 2 faders aren't really assigned to any functions. So, but if I wanted to just come over and let's say I disable the script, okay, so we come over here. So now I want to take CC11. So let's say I just have like modulation. So I just have CC1 from my mod wheel on my controller. If I wanted to turn this into a different controller, we could go to the routing page here and just say, okay, I want to go to my, what we call the input transformer, and we'll open the panel. So I want to take my MIDI CC messages, we're going to transform, and we're going to say our type is set to controller, and we can say that the subtype MIDI controller number 1. So we're going to take MIDI controller 1, and then we're going to come over here and we want to take MIDI controller 1 and take it into MIDI controller 2. So with our main value, we now want to add 10. So channel controller 1 will turn into controller 11. So let's come over here. Let's take our subtype, and I think here we add 10. So now what was controller 1 is now controller 11. So once I turn this on, it's taking the incoming CC1 and adding 10 to the 1 to turn it into CC11. But if you're using the MIDI remote, realize that those MIDI CC messages, instead of transmitting MIDI CC to the program, those MIDI CC messages are kind of the conduit, the language that connects the fader to functions in Cubase with the MIDI remote. So if you wanted them to work as just normal MIDI CC, don't configure it as a MIDI remote or turn the script off temporarily. All right. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, wonderful to see Soren in Sweden. All right, and we see that Mr. Try4666 is also from Vienna, Austria. All right, and we see just Samir is also, it says it's an X-Touch compact, and it says on a Mac, and there is no script friend. So, make sure that your controller is actually, your controller may be configured as a Mackie control. If it's in Mackie control, it may be just like how the MIDI control is being controlled from, how the MIDI remote is overtaking the MIDI messages as the language, that the Mackie control is kind of doing the same thing. So if you have your X-Touch compact, make sure that when you go in here to your Mackie control, so you'll probably have it configured as a Mackie control. At that point, you could just turn off these MIDI input and output ports and see what MIDI messages it's actually transmitting. All right, so we have Gene Muse sending greetings from the USA. Thanks for joining us. All right. Yeah, and your scripts will work on Mac or PC. All right, wonderful to see Daniela as Da Vinci Girl from Bochum, Germany, or Bochum, Germany. Not sure which way it's pronounced. All right, we see everyone's missing the virtual ice creams from Michael Teams today. All right, so we see Gene Muse says still with his Cubase Elements 6 and Wavelab Elements 7. Okay. All right, let me jump back to other questions that were mailed in. All right, so we had a question. I was looking for ways to increase the bass presence in my mixes when played back on my phone, and found an interesting video in which the podcaster used Fab Filter Saturation. It's youtube.com, says 4 ways to make your mix sound like a pro by Big Z. What's the best way to accomplish this in Cubase? So I think that most of the time I find that, I don't know any mastering engineer that necessarily, mixes, with an iPhone as a reference. I know it's obviously used a lot. I remember Michael Romanowski, who's often on the live stream, once told me, he's like, when they're making Lord of the Rings, they make it for the big, huge screen. And then, once it looks great there, they can scale it down, and you don't make it for your phone and then try to scale it up. But and the premise of this video is to take kind of low-end information and add distortion starting at about 120 hertz to make it kind of pop more in the phone. So if you wanted to do and kind of mimic that technique, what you could do is go to the channel, and then one of the plugins that comes with Cubase is called Quadrafuzz. And what you could do here is just kind of take your particular frequency range. So once you are here, you could just kind of find, and you could adjust the frequency range here. So it's almost perfect. You could just kind of boost your low end. And when you do this, you have different types of distortion. So this is a multi-band distortion. So you could distort only particular frequencies. So if you want it to be tube or kind of straight distortion, if you want it to be more amplifier or decimator, so these will all be kind of different types of distortion. So if you want to do a multi-band distortion that distorts the low end to make it pop a little more on your phone speaker, you could do that. I'm not sure if that would make a big difference. I didn't listen to the examples in the video on my phone. But it seems, like if you make it sound great on normal speakers, that it translates well depending on your room. So, but if you wanted to have a multi-band distortion, like the same concept that was expressed in the video, you could do it here using, again, the Quadrafuzz. You'll see it under distortion category, Quadrafuzz version 2. So this is a multi-band distortion plugin where you have 5 different types of distortion for each band. You could also run it through additional processing if you want it to have delays and have this synced. So all sorts of great stuff you could do with this. So this is a little hidden gem of a plugin that's probably underutilized by most Cubase users. Okay, so we have a question. My audio peak and audio performance is constantly hitting the red, whilst the ASIO guard and real time and disc cache are always below 1/4. I find myself getting audio pops and clicks and click site virtual instruments. I have an M1 Ultra and I'm using a SanDisk SSD for my samples. So, a lot of times this could depend, if you're seeing kind of performance, it seems like I should be getting a lot more power out of my system than I'm actually getting. It could be that, if you load up multiple plugins on one track, that could take a lot more processing power because that one track is basically accessing one CPU core. And if you have multiple tracks, so if you put 16 inserts on one track, that could make your computer, your real-time audio performance come to a halt. Whereas if you had the same 16 plugins on 16 different tracks, that would automatically kind of scale the processing across different processors. And I think I did a project to show this. Take a look. Okay, yeah, CPU distribution. All right. All right, so on this particular track, I'm going to enable this track here. Let me see if this is going to cooperate or not. Okay, so on this one, I opened up 16 multi-tap delays on this particular project. So I'm going to come over and let's look at, so this is one track with 16 instances of the multi-tap delay, which could be running multiple plugins within that one particular plugin. So I just duplicated 16 instances of this where we have multiple effects going. And then let's look at my CPU, my audio performance window, rather. So when I hit play, so this is just a one track with 16. You can see I'm kind of immediately in the red. My processor, you see the playback be very slow. Okay, so that's one track with 16 of the plugins, immediate overload, and we could watch how the cursor, the playback position is kind of very throttled. If we listen to it, it's really probably not even going to play back. All right, now let's disable that track. And I'm going to enable 16 tracks playing the audio, but with one instance of that particular plugin. So the same plugin, the same settings, and we're going to enable the 16 tracks. So same audio file, but this one is 16 tracks with one instance. So we're running the same number of plugins, but because of how it's going to scale, let me close this window. And we'll reopen it again. So now as we play, everything is playing. We can see our ASIO guard input. High, but as we do this, that can easily kind of play back the system. So check just to make sure that, like, you know, your project doesn't have, you know, like so many plugins on one particular track. If it does, duplicate the track, put 5 plugins on one, you know, 5 plugins on the second track. But you can see how running 16 plugins in one track could bring a fast computer to a crawl, or playing the same or doing one plugin across 16 tracks is very doable. So just a quick heads up there on audio performance. All right. All right, so we had a question. It says, hi, just a clarification on a previous email. It says, when I wrote about my previous email, it goes a lot deeper. Another example, and I think this was with naming particular notes in the key editor. So it says another example, it says they have lots of articulation. It says you may want it to be able to name each note in a key editor. It says, what I wrote in my previous email goes a lot deeper. Here's an example in which is when programming MIDI guitars. They have lots of articulations, and they're activated by adding a MIDI note on a specific MIDI key. Since I don't know where the keys are in the keyboard, I'll have to try different keys until I get it right. So if we're doing this and we have like a guitar instrument, how we could determine this is, you know, the best way of approaching this is to use the expression maps. So for instance, if I come over here, let's add a HALion sonic here. I think we could find some guitars with articulations. All right, let me just let me just see if I can find. All right, let me just look in. Just see if I can find some that have articulations. I can do some. I'll just go ahead and show some orchestral stuff here. We'll get kind of the same point across. All right, so a lot of times we may have instruments that have different articulations. So let's say we'll go to our electric bass here. Right, so we go to our clean bass. So here we're going to have notes that are going to do articulations. So I'll just bring this up. So when I play so harmonics, muted, kind of pick. So we have our different articulations here. So slap, and we can see it listed in the instrument. So artificial harmonics, let's say sustain pick. So as we click, we could see what so if we wanted to now deal with the instrument itself, what we could make is kind of a MIDI expression map, and then at this point we could just see what our expression map is. So, and the beauty of this is we could just kind of create an event, double click, we go to the expression map, and now we can import the key switches. So if I have just a bass line, we can now automatically take the key switches and view them as the articulations and dynamics. So when we want to just kind of draw in particular notes, like I say, when I have this note, and I'll just say we will repeat that note a bunch of times, that we could just switch between our different. So if I want that to be sustained, to mute, back to a slap pull, back to sustain, that this would automatically just capture those particular articulations. Let me just solo this. So you don't have to remember what the notes are, because you could have these expression maps. So, and even if we wanted to jump over and do like an orchestral type of thing where we run into this a lot, to switch between different bowing articulations, that now I could just open this up, and when we look at our articulations, that I could come over here to the expression map, import the key switches, and now all of my different articulations are automatically mapped there. Hang on just one second. All right, sorry about that. All right. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, so another question, this is following up on a question from Tuesday. Since freezing tracks is the same thing as rendering, what settings and level of rendering would be the exact same thing as freezing tracks? All right, so when we go to, if we have effects and stuff on our tracks and we go to freeze a track, so we come over, click on our little snowflake. All right, so we could say, do we want to include inserts? Do we want to unload the instruments when frozen? So if we wanted to mimic that with the render in place, you could choose to select the track. You could include the channel settings, which would be inserts. You could also include send effects or master effects. So to mimic exactly, but we could do more with send effects and master effects. And we could just choose to disable the source tracks. And then if you wanted to hide the source tracks or just have them muted, or you could hide the disabled tracks as well. So this would mimic the same settings as freeze and actually have the particular audio event show up on the project window. All right, let me jump back to live questions. Again, you could always email questions in advance by going to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, just finding my place where it dropped off before we come back. Okay, see some discussion on being an audio file. All right, so we have InDrop asks, hi Greg, I have a mastering session for an EP with 5 tracks. What is the best way to export each mastered track? Is it possible to do all of them at the same time and get different files? Thank you. So yeah, let's go ahead and I'll show you. Okay, so we'll import some audio files. So let's say you have 5. All right, so I'm going to put all these on one track. All right, so I want to take all of these files. I'm going to put, like, I'm going to go to my edit to functions, and I'm just going to put a space between. I'll just put a default 2 seconds of space. So we'll go over here to functions, and we'll set spacer between events. And we'll choose 2 seconds. All right, so now between each of the events. Now, if you wanted to treat these all in one track with the same processing, so when you come over here, you say, okay, I really want to have a squasher, something like that, and let's say frequency EQ. So let's say more surgical EQ, and we wanted to have kind of a imager plugin. So let's say, we wanted all these, but I still wanted to export each of these as separate files, even if they're on one track. So what I would do is come over here, add a marker track. Okay, so we're going to add a marker track. All right, and we want to call this like songs. So I would select this, hit the letter P on your computer keyboard, and we're going to activate a cycle marker. Hit P, activate cycle marker, and we could name these as well. So if I want to activate P, and I think if I hold down, it's not what I want. But yeah, there's a keyboard shortcut for it too. It's just blanking on it. I'll come over here. Let's hit P and then cycle marker. Okay. All right, so we have cycle markers based around our events. So let's say we're all kind of happy. We're doing all this great, wonderful processing. And now I want to export all 5 of these at one time. So to do that, we could just say, okay, I want to do my export. And let's do our export audio mixdown. I'm going to choose multiple. And then we're going to say we're going to do our stereo out. And then we could also just say use cycle markers. So I'm going to just come right over here. And if you have like 100 markers, you could just scroll down, select them all and check. And if we had our markers named, so let's just quickly come over here and we'll hit Control M and we can name our markers appropriately. So let's say, okay, we're going to call this title is Outlaw, then Yokomo. So we could just kind of do this for all of our markers. Okay, so this marker, sorry, wrong. So the name of this song is Gibraltar. Then Forever, sorry. So now I've named the markers. So now when I go to export, and I want to include all of the processing, so we're going to come over here, go to your file menu to export audio mixdown. We have all of our markers. We have it set to multiple, and we're going to export these. I'm going to put them into the project so we could see the result. And we could give it a naming convention. So we could say, okay, we want to be named based on the cycle marker. So we're going to say cycle marker here. And I'm going to create audio tracks, but we can put them all into the same folder. So we have our multiple songs here. So we will go ahead and now we're going to export based upon the cycle marker. And we could include, exclude all the processing. All right, we'll do one more. All right, and then we could basically just see that we come right over here and each of the songs is now exported as individual files with all of the processing. Now to include the processing or exclude the processing, probably doing mastering, you want to include it. Just on the effects section, we could just choose your inserts and channel strip, disabled, group sends, or master effects as well. So let me know if that makes sense. So set a cycle marker for each one, and then you should be able to just kind of export each of the files independently at once. All right, so we see Achilles asked, hello, Cubase 13 Pro, Windows 11. I have an Akai Mark III MIDI, and when I customize some knobs and save it, when I close my Cubase project, open again, they are not there. Any solution to save as preset? So I'm not sure how you're customizing the knobs. So are you doing it in the MIDI remote? So if you're doing it within the MIDI remote, what you can do is just come over here and you could have different mapping assistants. So let's say if we are, in our MIDI remote, that we could just come over here and you could set up kind of different mapping assistants for this so that you could have the same condition. But let me know how you're configuring it. If you're just doing a MIDI learn, I don't think that that's going to be saved with the project. It's kind of a temporary, so let me know if you're going into a particular plugin and just saying right click, pick up for MIDI remote mapping, and then you move a particular knob. So let's say, okay, let's do a new MIDI remote. So I want to select a parameter. So we could save this as part of the MIDI remote. So if I come here, I want that knob to be controlled. We'll say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. And now once I do that, it's saved in that particular, we can see as I move the knob here that it's controlling that, but it's going to be saved directly inside of the MIDI remote. So maybe you're not saving it in the MIDI remote mapping page, a new page, and it's using the existing, it's maybe perhaps using the existing MIDI remote mapping page. So if you could specify, that would be helpful. All right, so we have George is saying he's late to the party. Well, you made it, so we're glad to have you here. Just had to hit the like button for being late. Okay, George's question is, when I record in a loop 8 measures and later want to have the passes after one another, what is the best way? Now there are 8 beats in different lanes. Okay, so let me see if we could. All right, so let's say I have this loop here, and we'll put it in musical mode. All right, so I'm going to just take this particular instrument. We're going to route it to a group channel. Then I will record an audio track from that group. Okay, and we're going to do, all right, just make sure I'm reading this right. Okay, I want to have passes one after another. Okay, so if we take a look at this, we'll say, okay, so we're going to play this particular loop. I'll slow it down to something more reasonable here. All right, and now this audio track, I want the input to be the group. All right, so I'm going to record this several different ways. So I'm going to record it into a cycle. So it's going to be one recording, and each of these recordings is going to go into a different lane when we look at it. We'll let it go 3 or 4 lanes. All right, so now when we look at this, we could open up what we call lanes, and we have each of these different passes. So as we do this, now this is actually one continuous recording. So if I wanted to pick like, oh, you know, this word, we could go to the comp tool, which looks like a hand. We say that word was perfect here, and love that here, and that word there. So this makes our best comp of the performance. So when we do this, these will automatically kind of show in our master lane. Now, interestingly, if we go to our audio pool, so let's come over here, and we're going to see our pool window from, since we, as I mentioned, this is one contiguous recording. When we drag this file out, so I'm going to drag it to a track. We can notice that, again, this is one recording. This is the same file as all of these. So this is the one continuous recording that was broken up into lanes. So this is the one continuous recording, and this is the same recording but broken into lanes as different takes for each time it's cycled back to the beginning of the transport. So if you needed to get the original file, you could do that, or if you just wanted to cycle it in lanes, just simply come right over here, open up the lanes, and then you could do a comp edit very easily, just kind of using your comp tool and get the best parts. But if you wanted the full thing as a continuous, continuous recording, drag it from the pool to the project window. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see from Gene Muse, just says the Cubase 13, it must be paired with Windows 11, etc. So I run on Windows 10 on my system, so Windows 10 still works great. All right, so Keith Gilmore says, sorry I had to go. It's been a great experience. Many thanks, Greg. So hopefully we'll see you on future live streams, and thanks for coming today. All right, we see Michael Teams has made it. We all missed you, Michael. Glad to see you were able to make the live stream today. Okay. We see Tim K just giving kudos to Jazz Dude for all his great efforts. And we see Tim K just saying the information sharing is super positive here from everyone. Just saying, yeah, we're wonderful to have such a wonderful community of great people. Gerald Ely says he overdid the beer and he has no room for virtual ice cream. All right, so we see Michael Teams granted my family, myself, 1 gallon of Scoopy's Black Diamond ice cream. All right, so we see from Soren just says, Greg, many times when I start recording audio, example bass, the playhead can jump back 1 bar. I set the physical playhead bar to 10 and want the recording to start there, and it jumps to bar 9. Any fix for that? So probably what it is there's probably just a pre-roll. So let's say we're at bar 10, okay? And when we go to, I think you'll see it, let's see if it's just, sorry, I have my tablet just kind of in the way here. All right, so see if you have this icon turned on right here, activate pre-roll. So now when I want to record, let's see if it's, and we could also do it from the transport. So you'll see pre-roll, post-roll. So here I could set my pre-roll amount. And it might be set here to like 1 bar. So let's say if I undo that recording and I hit record, it jumps back. So try just going to your transport menu, and you may see use pre-roll, use post-roll. Uncheck that, and now when you hit record, it should start right at measure 10. But with pre-roll turned on and the pre-roll value here I have set to 1 measure, we could just come, again, transport, pre-roll, post-roll. Then it's going to rewind 1 bar, punch in, and record. So transport menu, try deactivating, use pre-roll. Okay. Let's see, Michael Teams isn't convinced that Gerald Ely doesn't have enough room for ice cream after the beer. So. Okay. Discussion of $71,000 speaker cables. All right, we have the famous Fred Corey on. He's a recovered rock star and a wonderful composer. Everyone check out his work on Sci-Fi, The Arc, if you haven't seen it. Just concluded here Wednesday night. And my son wants season 3 to start next week. So you have to hurry up, Fred. All right, his question is, hi, Greg and everyone. I have a question. When adding a new effects track, every output possible comes up. I just want mono or stereo. How can I turn off the other options? So I think if you just ignore them, so, when we come up here and we just add an effects track, that you could just say, by default, you can say, okay, I want my configuration to be mono or stereo. But if you never change these, you don't have to, like the audio outputs, if you don't change those settings will persist. So let's say if I switch it to my left channel and we add the track, I want to add another effect channel track that is still carried over. So if you never change that, you don't have to worry about it. So you can just kind of right click, and as you add the effects channel track, you could just choose whether you want it to be mono or stereo. If you don't change the routing, these settings will persist until the next time. So just say, okay, this I want mono or I want stereo, and then just hit enter, and then it will be added, and you don't have to mess around with the other settings if you don't want to. All right, so we see Soren, Greg, will the next version of Cubase 14 have more chord pad presets? So generally, we don't really talk about new releases until they're actually released. But, you know, if you have some presets that you want, you let me know, and I can see if I could send them in. All right, so wonderful to see Sable Winters on. Wishing everyone a happy Friday. All right, my chat field jumped. All right, everyone's happy to see Sable on. All right, so we see Soren just says, hi Greg, I'm serious with some songs I make, but I have time to toy around with some songs. Isn't there a way to get a rhythmic patterns for chords? What have I forgotten so that the chord isn't legato to the next chord, but a pattern of some sort? So there's a number of ways to do this. So let's say I have okay, I'll just make one here quickly. So you can do some like creative rhythmic things. So let's say I want to add an instrument track here. We'll make it just a quick Groove Agent SE. All right, so let's say I have, I want to do like a basic like swing hi-hat vibe here. Let's see, why isn't it? All right, my step isn't on. Let me just. Here, I'll just take a pattern here. Okay, so let's say I just want me try just another part here real quick. Hang on, sorry. Okay, so let's say I want to take this particular hi-hat. All right, and I'm just going to put a quick pattern on it. I'm going to put a groove on it here. So that now when we come over to quantize, I'll put just a really heavy swing on it. So we'll apply the quantize to this. And I'm going to slow the tempo down here. Okay, so I'm going to take we'll make a quick pad sound. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. That. I'll just grab something in Retrologue. Sorry about that. All right, so just grab the all right, so I'm just going to put in just all right, so let's say we have these particular sounds here. And we want to take like this particular pattern. I'm going to come over here. Let's open up a MIDI gate on this sound. So we're going to go to the inserts, and we will, under dynamics, you'll see a MIDI gate. Okay, and I want to now take this output track. So we'll come over here to the output routing, and we want to set this to our MIDI gate. Okay, so now when I take this track, so this MIDI pattern, so any kind of chord that you wanted to come over here and just put in, let's say, okay, we have this, I wanted to now like put in 32nd notes or 8th notes, I could just come over and join like different notes together here so that the gate is opening up from the MIDI notes themselves. So as we just play, so we could take if we wanted to add different kind of rhythmic elements, you could take a MIDI part and open up the gate on a pad to make it a little more interesting using the MIDI gate. So put the MIDI gate on the track, take the MIDI track itself and route it out to the sidechain input. And then if you wanted to kind of reverse that, you could say, okay, note on to release, note to release, or if you want it to be a note on or note off. So we could, so any other track could be the basis, the rhythmic basis for opening and closing the gate. All right. All right, so we see George's question about the comping. Says I can also drag the point bottom right, but I could get rid of the other lanes then, or would that delete the recording? So let's take a look at, see if I saw that project open. I think it's, let's see if we can still, if we have that open still. Okay. So, so here it is. So let's say, I can also drag the bottom right, but can I get rid of the other lanes then, or would that delete the recording? So if you choose to, if you know, once you have all of the lanes kind of configured as you want, what I often do if you want to kind of clean it up, I would duplicate the track version. So we still have all of these just in case, you know, because there's always a chance you may go, oh, it was only that one other take that you happen to delete. So I would often duplicate the track version and then do a quick bounce selection. And that this way I could say, okay, I don't have any lanes on this one, but if we wanted to go back and see the lanes, that, you know, you could have kind of the best of both worlds. So once everything is there, then if you need to go back and make an adjustment, all your data is there, but it's not kind of getting in the way of your workflow. So I would just duplicate the track version and then render that, and then you could always go back if needed. All right, so we see Soren asks, Greg, in VST Connect Pro, the transfer of audio, I've been told that it's MP3 quality. Is that true? And in that case, should you press download in it to get the WAV file? So once you are recording in real time, if you're doing a stereo recording, that would be transmitted as a FLAC file that could be then converted, and that's a lossless compressed audio format. But when you do the downloads, if you're doing like 16, 8, or 16 tracks with VST Connect Pro, once you do the download, that is the full resolution file. All right, so Tireman Guitar says, can I break the chord track with my vast jazz chord knowledge? You know, pretty much any chord that you play in. So let's say I have the chord track. You know, a lot of times chords could be interpreted different ways, many different ways. You know, if you give it to a rock person, a jazz person, a classical person versus, let's say, an avant-garde classical person, you may take the same exotic chord and it could be interpreted many different ways. So let's say if we add a chord track, you know, one of the cool things that you could do, like let's say I just want to come here and we click on the chord track and we're in the definition, is, you know, like even if I just randomly threw my hands on a keyboard, it could just tell us the chord for us. So we can get very complex. Now, sometimes, you know, you may want to see like a 2 chord instead of a sus2. And if we go into the preferences in Cubase or settings in later macOS versions, and you go to the chord display, so say we come over here to the chord track. That you could have customized, you know, so let's say you have a flat, a 9 with a 6 13th chord, that you could actually create your own custom spelling. So it will pretty much, you know, as long as you have the notes in there, if it interprets it in a way that you don't want to, you could use this preference here to reinterpret the chord name spelling if needed. See, John Costigan says, now that's a revelation. Lanes comped to a single track. Thanks, Greg. Soren says, Greg, thanks for pre-roll info. All right, so you see Fred Corey says, haha, thanks. Fred is one of my favorite people in the world. So Sable Winter says, sorry, let the Zoom slip by. She's been traveling. I almost forgot today was a hangout. So we'll see you on the next time. All right, so Fred Corey says, okay, perfect. Just tried it. Great, thanks. All right, so Tireman Guitar says, does it now automatically map the GM drum map, or is that a Mac thing? So when you go to add a track, the GM drum map will always be available for you. So let's say if we come over here to the drum map, the GM map, which will work on a lot of devices, will be there. If it is a Groove Agent instrument, so let's say I come over here and load up a Groove Agent SE. One of the great things about this, I'll load up a kit. Slide this over. So let's say now I come here, we have a kit loaded, all these different. So with Groove Agent SE tracks, we could automatically, so we see that the GM map is always there, available because it's the most commonly used one, but we could also create the drum map from the instrument. So now when I go to open the editor, all the drum names are derived from Groove Agent here, which is very handy. All right, Jim Fox, who lives just down the street from me, says, hello, Greg. Will Noendo be at AES New York City next week? Hope to see you there. Best of all. So I won't be at AES, and there won't be an official Steinberg presence or Yamaha presence. But I'd love to get together with you. I know Jim lives just like 2 miles away from me, 2 or 3 miles away. So, but I'd love to go visit you. I just had lunch with Greg Lukens this week, so he seems to be doing well if you haven't talked to him. So, but I'll reach out to you. Maybe we get together in person. We'll do that trick. Hope you're doing well, Jim. Jim's a wonderful engineer. All right, Tireman Guitars asks, what's new in Retrologue 2 versus version 1? So Retrologue 2 is going to add not only kind of an arpeggiator that's built in, it's going to have an effects engine. So we could come over here if you want to have like a resonator, if you want to have different modulation, delay, and reverb effects. And also it's going to have a really slick modulation matrix that wasn't there before. So we say, okay, I want to take, this LFO, I wanted to have LFO 1 here. Then you could actually just kind of even drag to assign different LFO assignments. So you can come over here and say, okay, LFO 1 is, now we have our depth. and we want this to do cutoff, but you could also just easily assign different, so like as I just take LFO1, I can say I want it to go to, and I can see all the available destination parameters. So I wanted to assign it to that. So now when we play LFO1, can automatically be assigned to your different topic, different destinations by doing that. So it's a more enhanced modulation matrix, arpeggiators with wonderful presets. So really take your time to kind of check these out. And the effects engine. Those are most of the big themes. All right, Daniel says, great stream. Looking forward to the next one. I'll be on Tuesday. Have an amazing weekend, bro. So yeah, looking forward to have my orchestral concerts this weekend. So be nice to get that. Looking forward to that. All right, so George says, thanks a lot for your help. You're welcome. Thanks for being on the live stream. Okay. See Best Korean Jesus looking forward to have time to play with his Absolute collection. Okay, Bratman Studio asks, so if I have an external synth part render in place, so now I have MIDI and audio the same track, can I save them as version 1 and version 2 in the same track to keep down lanes? I'm thinking not. Well, you're going to have the MIDI and the audio, so they're going to be on 2 tracks. But what you can do is, let's say I have, all right, it's my killer drum beat, and let's say I render this. So we'll come here and I'll just do a quick render in place. So often what I do is, let's say if I wanted to keep those, my external MIDI and the render together, I would select them and then hit Control or Command plus the letter G to group them. And now when I move one event, the MIDI and the audio will be locked together so that they can't really get separated easily. So, and then if you want to ungroup it, just hit Control or Command plus the letter U. So now they can move independently with both selected, Control or Command plus G to group. And now I could move these and they'll be kind of almost just, you know, inherently linked together so that they can't be separated. Okay, you see Sable Winters hit the like button, and she was number 117. And Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, I think we are out of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. And I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick with their Steinberg products, and hope that you go home, you're at home in your studio this weekend or your professional facility and come up with some great new tracks with the tips and tricks. And I appreciate everyone for being part of such a wonderful, positive community, and just want to, you know, always just really honored to be able to help so many people out. And we look forward to more questions. And if you have questions that you want sent in advance, you could send them via email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And again, we do this on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I'm so appreciative of everyone taking part of their morning, evening, afternoon, learning more about Steinberg products, and really grateful for that, and just always a joy to be able to help people with their Steinberg journey. And we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up like 2 minutes early. I have to go mow the grass tonight. So, all right, let's just give it another 20, 30 seconds, and we'll see. All right, so Michael Teams is giving me many gold medals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Looks like 11, maybe. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up just a minute or two early. Thanks again. And again, we'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I want everyone to have a wonderful weekend, and please stay safe and healthy so we can all make great music with Cubase. With that, we will go ahead and wrap up, and have a wonderful weekend, and goodbye.